U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, also known as USFWS, was founded in 1871 by U.S. Commission on Fish and Fisheries in the Department of Commerce and the Division of Economic Ornithology and Mammalology in the Department of Agriculture. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was previously two different departments called Bureau of Fisheries and the Bureau of Biological Survey. In 1940, the Department of the Interior joined the two departments into one, which was called the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The Bureau of Sport Fisheries and Wildlife was created as a part of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in the Department of the Interior on November 6, 1956, by the Fish and Wildlife Act of 1956. That act was amended on July 1, 1974, by Public Law 93-271 to abolish the position of Commissioner of Fish and Wildlife and designate the Bureau as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Their mission is to work with others to conserve, protect, and enhance fish, wildlife, and plants and their habitats for the continuing benefit of the American people. They have three objectives. First, to assist in the development and application of the environmental stewardship ethic for our society, based on the illogical principles, scientific knowledge of fish and wildlife, and a sense of moral responsibility. Second, to guide the conservation, development, and management of the nation's fish and wildlife resources. And third, to administer a national program to provide the public opportunities to understand, appreciate, and wisely use fish and wildlife resources. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service manages more than 560 national wildlife refuges and thousands of small wetlands and other special management areas. 70 national fish hatcheries, 65 fishery resource offices, and 86 ecological service field stations run through the fishery programs they have. Most of the land they manage is non-federal land.
One of the first acts the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service passed was the Bald Eagle Act of 1940. Another important act was the 1958 amendments to the Fish and Wildlife Coordination Act. These amendments laid the groundwork for future important acts such as the National Environmental Policy Act, also known as NEPA, and parts of the Clean Water Act. After World War II in 1962, the Refuge Recreation Act was authorized to allow people to recreate on the land as long as they do not interfere with the land's purpose. Once necessary funds became available, they were implemented towards making recreational activities. In 1973, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and National Marine Fisheries Service were given authority to enforce the newly passed Endangered Species Act. A couple endangered species at that time were the Atwater prairie chickens and the Mississippi sandhill crane. A more recent act that was proposed was in 2014 to remove a fish called the Oregon chub from the Endangered Species Act because of their successful recovery. If passed, it would be the first fish removed from the Endangered Species Act. This would be a major success for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. A controversy with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is whether or not the Endangered Species Act is effective. The question is brought up by conservation biologists and private property rights groups. These groups were frustrated with the fact that they cannot continue to construct on their own land because animals that are on the endangered species list live here. Another controversy is the proposal of taking the gray wolf off the list because it would put these animals at risk of being killed by farmers and hunters, which will just put them back on the list. One of the most current issues that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service faces is the feeding of waterfowl animals. Feeding them puts them at risk of being too comfortable around humans and being killed.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has over 150 million acres of wildlife land throughout the country. 18,217 acres consists of the Turnbull National Wildlife Refuge, located in Cheney, Washington. Turnbull was created as a breeding ground for waterfowl after hunters reported a sharp decline in the birds. Turnbull is a mix of grassland, timber, and wetland. Turnbull was designed as a bird breeding ground, but along with being the home of 200 types of birds, it also houses 20 breeds of bats, elk, various rodents, and white-tailed deer. It is a safe place where the water birds can thrive and repopulate. The population served by Turnbull are the local wildlife and those who want a beautiful place to hike or to learn about ecology and biology. For the public, it offers an array of services. There is a small fee of $3 per vehicle upon entry to Turnbull, but has a multitude of walking and hiking paths. There is a visitor center which has an interactive wall where a person can find the hidden animals and see a model of them, along with a description about the animal and how they live in Turnbull. It also has a touchscreen table that allows visitors to see videos of the animals. There is a learning center for school trips for teachers to hold class and have the students walk around to experience the different wildlife in person, not just see them in a textbook. There is a driving path offered for those who do not have much time or just want to drive through and see the birds and wildlife without having to leave their cars, which is what we did when we first went to Turnbull. You could see the areas that are marked for burning, and it was very interesting to see the scorched earth. When we went to Turnbull, we did not see as much wildlife as we had hoped for. However, when 2 geese flew next to us, it was definitely the highlight of our trip. They landed about 15 feet away from us and then proceeded to walk along the path and eventually waddle their way into the water. We walked on a trail around Middle Pine Lake, which is about a 20-minute walk. While going on the trail, we saw different types of ducks and 2 swans.